everybody. My name is Bill Amirault, and I want to welcome you to Career Clarity and Purpose. In this live and recorded event today, I'll be speaking with a panel of 14 experts, one of whom is on the call right now. His name is Marty Latman, and they will reveal their strategies to provide career clarity aligned with your true purpose. Was your life and career impacted by COVID? Or were you downsized, right-sized, reorg, let go, rift, or any other separation that may have happened? Or maybe you were part of the Great Resignation. Or maybe you realized that something was out there that's actually better for you. Well, that's the topic of discussion that we're going to have today. And let me pin Marty here so that I can get him in the right place. Great, here we go. Introducing Marty Latman, who is your favorite networking CFO from a lot of experiences that he's had before, a consultant, a career coach, and a mentor. Also an excellent keynote speaker and helps businesses and people reach a higher success level. And Marty, I just want to welcome you here today and thank you for taking the time to provide our audience with your perspective and background. Oh, you're muted. Okay, hold on a second. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much, Bill. You know,
I've used Zoom before, believe it or not. So sorry for that interruption.
No problem. Just the two most used words over the last 2.5 years are "you're muted." So just keep that in mind. It happens to a lot of people, a lot of times. It's great to be here. Thank you very much. Good to see you all. A lot of friends that I know, a lot of names that I know, and let's have some fun.
Sounds like a plan. So, Marty, you and I have had this conversation. I've seen you speak many times at different networking groups through the years, and you've always provided great insights. But the first thing that I wanted to explore, for not just for me, but for the audience here, is the different careers and positions that you've had, and what made those transitions successful. And they may not all have been, like myself and others, I'm sure. And then how did those lead you into what you're doing right now?
Wow. Okay. Well, a lot of people, as they grow up, they really don't know what they want to do, even as they get older. But when I was in the 8th grade, I had a situation where my teacher at that time, she wanted us to write, at that time they're called compositions, as to what we wanted to do when we grew up. And what I was not big in reading at that time in my life. I was big in sports. And so what was happening is that we had to subscribe for a book, Job Opportunities, from the Department of Labor.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a book that had all these different job opportunities. And I received the book only like 2 days before the composition was due. I opened it up and it was all alphabetical. And the first job opportunity was for accountant. And this is a true story. And I looked at it and said, well, you like to help people, you're good in math, and you like to solve problems.
Okay.
And so that's how I became an accountant. I read it, wrote my composition, and I was off and saying that I'm going to be an accountant.
And there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, you became CFO of some very well-known organizations in New Jersey through the years, and that you were doing that when I first met you. So, how did those transitions or expansions in your skill set come about?
Well, what happened was that I initially started in when I got out of college in public accounting. I worked for a large national CPA firm, and I started doing some work for them. I had some nice sized clients, well-known clients, but at that time also, I became heavily involved in data processing. They had what they called EDP auditing. And so I was being trained also in data or, IT. And as a result of it, I saw that there really wasn't a career path for someone now with my background, this national CPA firm.
Hmm.
So I looked at it, I said, well, it's time to find a role in corporate America. And that's what I did. And then I left. I started working for a big organization where I set up um, at that time, the EDP audit department in one organization. And then another organization called me where I knew a lot of people. I went over to work for them and I met some really, really interesting people. I worked with some people who sign your dollar bills. I worked for an individual who occupied the White House.
Hmm.
I worked with an individual who was the CEO of a large corporation.
Hmm.
And so I spent a couple years in this organization. Um, when the organization strategically went the wrong way, I was asked to take a look and see what went wrong. In doing it, I uh, developed certain types of uh, procedures that we went through to determine what the issues were. If we could change the direction of the company, we could not. And so as a result of it, we were selling the company. I went to another large corporation. I helped that corporation um, do a huge merger.
Hmm.
When I was called in for my evaluation, where I had a nice smile on my face and was expecting great accolades for what I did. The CFO at that time says to me, "You did a great job. Really appreciate what you've done. But I want to let you know there's only one finance position available. I'm taking it and I'm going to give you 2 weeks salary. So thank you very much."
So you worked yourself out of a job then.
Very quickly. And I've looked at it, I said, something's not right here. But it was really a blessing in disguise because from that point on, I really found my passion for small, medium-sized entrepreneurial organizations.
Hmm.
And that's where I started doing a lot of my work. In doing it, I did a lot of networking. I met a lot of wonderful people. And I always look for challenges. And in doing it, I help companies become better than they were when I first started with them.
Hmm.
And as a result of it, uh, different companies then would call me and ask if I would, leave where I currently were and go work for them. And as a result of it, I did in several positions. I've been in 21 different industries along the way.
Wow. Yeah.
I've been from manufacturing. I was I was the CFO of New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. I was the
Tickets still? Can we get you for no, just kidding.
not
Go ahead.
today, not
Yeah,
today,
right,
but
right.
it's a great organization for those people in New Jersey or even in the New York metro area. You should, look in when they have their concerts and listen to them. It's really great. Um, I've been in charge of a commercial laundry where we did 400,000 pounds of laundry a night.
Wow. Yeah.
I've been in IT, an internet startup organization. So I've been in many different um, roles as either a CFO, a COO, or a CTO. Um, and then as a result of that, generally what I would have is that I would have reporting into me the HR departments, personnel departments, and other operational departments.
Hmm.
And I just had a a keen interest when it came to HR on bringing people into the organization. I have a philosophy that the most important asset a company could have is its people.
Hmm.
And as a result of it, I really got involved in HR to see how companies hire people, what they look for, not only in personality wise and how they interview people, on what the documents are that they look at, how they look at it, etc. And I always had that. And then what happened was that my IT company, we were located by ground zero on 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
Not a great day.
No.
But I looked at it and I said that as a result of it, a lot of people will be out of jobs, and I like to be able to help them. And so as a result of it, that's when I really got involved in, call it, quote, coaching.
Hmm.
And that's where I am today.
Well, you went from the quantitative to the qualitative side for, you were attracted to the human resources aspect of hiring, and I'm assuming, let's call it managing employees when they're on staff, and then if there's a separation, how to go through that process. And the first few times I saw you present, ABP always came up. There was an ageism presentation that you've given several times, and there's also a networking one. And
Right.
so, taking your experience from the work you just described, COO, CFO, IT operations, et cetera, how did that dovetail into what you're doing now and the impact on your clients?
Well, it's the old adage, I've been there, I've done that.
Yep.
Okay.
Hmm.
And that the positions that I've had um, really affect all the different areas of an organization. And as a result of it, I get to see, or I've seen, all the different pieces that have to be performed to make an organization successful. And that includes the personnel
Hmm.
side of it. So in going through this, when I talk to my clients, I have a perspective that this is what is happening on the inside.
Hmm.
Okay, this is what companies look for, and this is how you have to really present yourself. And my ABP, I've always talked about. You always have to be positive and prepared. Okay,
Hmm.
positive in that people, as we said throughout this, today, people have to be positive. You do not want to, be with negative people. Okay. People do not like to work with depressed or,
Oh,
negative people. Okay. At the same time, you have to be prepared because opportunities come at any time
hmm.
or at any place. And as a result of it, you really have to um, be ready to look at different situations and look at them from a strategic standpoint on really what's going on and what you can do to make it better.
Exactly. And, one of the things that, the other P that's coming up as you're saying this, always be positive, always be prepared, is the word pragmatic. And I would say that fits for you as well. Would you
Well,
agree?
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm too humble to go through that. It's just that I'm just here to help people. Look, um, in going through this, and Merrill had, talked about it, and, Paul did earlier this morning, being in transition um, from an emotional standpoint is very difficult.
Hmm.
But, my feeling is that everyone should go through transition at least once, because what happens is that when you go through transition, you become a better person.
Yeah.
You always come out of it better than you were going into it. You learn about yourself, you learn about others. And in doing that, knowing that you will find a job, and that is key because everybody finds a job.
Right.
Okay. It's a matter of saying, let me learn from this and let me see how what I'm doing today will help me in the future. I also talk about being in transition into a permanent job.
Hmm.
Landing is only temporary.
That's it. Yep. That's
You know,
it.
in today's environment, people do not work for companies for 10 years anymore like they used to. Don't expect a gold watch.
Yep.
It doesn't happen anymore. And so as a result of it, you really have to know it's great that you've landed. It's
Hmm.
really, really good that you've landed. But in all likelihood, you will not be in that same company, 5 years from now, because companies change, business changes, and as a result of it, you also change.
Yeah, exactly. And not only do you also change, and grow. I mean, that's one of the key things. And um, when I and I'm dating myself, and I guess probably dating both of us, but when I was in college, it was find yourself a job with a good big company, and you'll be there till you retire. And that all blew up in the 80s and the 90s, and really so in the dot-com bubble, and then completely so in the financial crisis in '08, which impacted, I'm sure, a lot of people, including myself, who are on this Zoom call. But the whole aspect of what you said, going through transition, you find out more about yourself, you find out more about others. And I guess the other thing I would evaluate is you find things that you have in you that you didn't know were there because you didn't need to access them.
That's right.
Yeah,
Very, very true.
and it's I when I after the financial crisis, in engineering school, there was this mantra that if some young lady ran into a guy that she didn't really like, she would scratch her head like this. If you can see my three fingers on my, and that actually is three L's, and it would be that she was calling this guy a three-dimensional loser, and he didn't even know it. But that's kind of how that's how I felt at that time. Wife was working full time in an education role, which is a very steady thing, and I had a lot of different jobs at different times. So it does try your confidence. It does make you question yourself in ways that you hadn't before. But through those questioning and through the introspection and other things that go along with it, and prayer, meditation, however you want to describe it, ultimately you come out the other side. And like you said, everybody should go through it, so that they can access those type of things. It doesn't feel like it at the time. It doesn't feel good at
No,
all. But
not at all.
yeah, yeah,
But it also helps by going through with someone else who is experiencing the same thing.
right.
Or, you could do that with a coach. But look, everyone going through it, you learn a lot about yourself.
Hmm.
Generally, everyone here with survivors.
Hmm.
We will find a way. And what you have to look at is that you will land. During this period, you will receive a lot of no's along the way. Okay. And when I receive a no, to me, it's good. People look at me, when you're rejected, how could you say that's good? Well, number one, I have a definite answer. I don't have to wait around.
Right.
What are they going to do? Okay. I'll try to leave the door open some way by basically saying, well, thank you very much. I understand that, that I'm not your number one, but I really would like to work for your company. Would it be okay if I check back with you in about, 3 months?
Hmm.
Generally, they'll say, yeah. And in doing that, I still left that door open for future um, contacts in there. But then I turn the page and then I move on to something else that I could concentrate on.
Hmm.
And when you're in this position, okay, and you get a no, as Joey Himmelfall will tell you, you know, you get a lot of no's, but there's always going to be a yes at the end. How close you are getting to a yes is every time you get a no,
Right.
statistically. And so, you have to accept and say, look, I'm getting closer to that yes. It only takes one yes.
Yep. And
So,
and like, to that end, a sales VP that I worked with, he always used to, when he'd come in his office, and I'd be putting a promotional program in front of him, and he said, "I'm not saying yes to this, but every no that I say is closer to your yes, so keep working on it."
that's right.
So and he was a colleague. He wasn't somebody I was interviewing with. But the other part of what you're saying there is no can mean not now. And if you do keep the door open and you have created a professional relationship with whoever you're speaking with, then the door can be open at another point. And you never know, there's always a 90-day probation period, at least that I've seen. And if that if their initial gold medal winner doesn't work out in 90 days and you're still available, hey, you never know, that can work out. And
No, it's very, very true. And
yeah.
it's all, a lot of it is mindset. Um, for instance, every month on the first Friday of the month,
Hmm.
the government comes out as to what is the unemployment rate.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep.
And sometimes now I don't know, it's about 4% now, a little
Mhm.
less, or 3.3%, 3.9%. Let me tell you something. That doesn't make a damn difference. Okay. There's only two numbers that count. It's either 0 or 100.
Yeah.
If I am working, it is 0% unemployment. If
Right.
I am not working, it is 0%. It's
Or 100.
100% on
Right. Right.
employment. Okay. And those are the only numbers that matter. So what you have to look at and say, all right, what do I have to do to get the position if there's 100% unemployment?
Hmm.
If I'm applying for a position, and let's say at this company, there are 5 people who are in this type of position. Well, I have to, under those circumstances, show the company that I will add more value than one of the people that they have who's currently there.
Yes. Hmm.
And if you look at it that way, you know, and saying it only takes one, and I have to show that I am better than one of the people they have on their staff, and that will help you find that position for
Hmm.
that position.
Well, there's another kind of an analogy to this that everybody takes for granted, but any professional sports team you watch, the turnover based on ability to contribute happens on a daily basis. I mean, and in within season, somebody gets an injury or quick, and Tom Brady started because Bledsoe got hurt, even though he was an outstanding quarterback and was an all-star. And then, of course, we know what happened to him. Although that's probably not a story I could use in the New York metro area
Nah.
very much. But the point's taken. Wally Pipp sat down and Lou Gehrig took his place and played 2,130 games consecutively. And these are the kind of, like, that perspective is, hey, how can I solve the problems better? How can I add more value? What can I accomplish that's going to make a difference to this organization? And once you know that and can confidently express that, then you're off the ground and you can really make an impact. Not just
You're right, Bill. I mean,
yeah.
the whole thing when people want to hire you,
Mhm.
it's because you will add value to their organization.
Right.
And what I've said is that all the documents that you provide to an organization, especially your resume,
Mhm.
okay, it should show the value that you have added in the past to other organizations, because that puts in the mindset of the people of the company you're trying to get into that this person has created value elsewhere. We want that person to create value for us. And sometimes, the job that they have, that they're offering to you, is certain responsibilities. But when they look at somebody who's added value, they also say to themselves, what am I not thinking of where this person could also add further value?
Right.
So it
Right.
puts you in a different area when it comes to the other, the competition.
No, you're right. And the other part that goes along with this, and you mentioned your resume, the documents that go through, and your LinkedIn profile obviously is your online version of that in a different way. It can be more personalized than a resume, which is always in the third person. But I've probably met 100,000 people plus or minus at 300 job fairs in the last 9 years, and they obviously slowed down significantly and came to a complete halt actually when COVID started. But what I've found is that somewhere between a half and two-thirds of any of the resumes I saw at a job fair needed some or significant upgrades because they focused on things that employers and recruiters don't care about, which are duties, responsibilities, and activities, and didn't focus on the things they do care about, which are how did you add value, what were your accomplishments, and how did you make a difference? And if you just rearranging that part of how do I define myself in a resume? And I'm not talking about the top part, your whole summary value proposition. I'm talking about the key bullet points, like you said, what did you do to add value, and how can that translate into my organization? Because you put this in the chat a couple times today. It's not about you. It's
It's not about, it's
it's
about
about
them. It's
it's about,
always about them.
yeah.
And, you know, when it comes to resumes, and I've helped a lot of people with a lot of resumes,
Hmm.
and that what you have to understand is generally two things on a resume. Number one, it's not for you, it's for the reader. That's number
Right.
one. And number two, each resume that you submit should be tailored to the job specs.
Hmm.
Okay? Which means that you, as the candidate, should have many resumes for the different positions that you have applied for in different companies,
Hmm.
because the resume should be specific to the job specs, which will
Yes.
then show the value that you have.
Yeah, and this is something that I agree on to a point of, if you have to adjust your resume every time, then your resume is not good enough to begin with. However, there are specific things that may be uh, directed towards the position that you're looking for that you want to highlight or exemplify that you didn't in your, let's call it your go-to resume. But yeah, exactly. So yeah, I want to get to a couple of examples of, you worked with, hundreds of clients, organizations, businesses, small, medium, and large, and individuals. How did you provide the support for giving them the clarity in terms of either A, the career direction they want to take, or B, the businesses that may have had to make those shifts on the fly, and you're the guy that's counting all the coin, uh, and having to make those recommendations. And I'm curious at a couple of examples of those. I'm sure the audience would love to hear them as well.
Um, I ask questions.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. I ask questions. And by doing that, I don't know everything. Okay. That's the way I look at it. I'll ask the questions as to what's your goals? What do you
Hmm.
really want to do? For the candidates, my clients who are looking for positions, it's, as I said up front, you got to know what you're doing, what you want to do.
Hmm.
And that is very difficult. A lot of people have a problem with that. And they have to sit down and really start looking at themselves. And I try to break it out into um, two main areas. Number one, the items that you like to do
Hmm.
and that you do well.
Hmm.
And the other one is the things that you don't want to do, okay, and you really don't do well, okay. And
Right.
then when you start putting them down, and this isn't only from a business standpoint, this is also from when you're out of your office, so to speak, when you're home, what do you like to do?
Right.
All right. And then what happens, I ask them to, start enlisting them, take a good old legal pad, draw a line on down the middle,
Yeah.
and on 1 minute, and you say, take your resume, look at your resume, look at the different places that you worked at, and what did you do that you like to do, and if you still like it, put it under the side I like to do.
Mhm.
If you did it well, but you don't like to do it anymore, that goes on the other side. And just take your resume and go through the different positions you've been at, and then think about what you do when you're not working, the things you like to do, things you don't
Mhm.
like to do. And then what you'll find as a candidate, and you start prioritizing that, you'll start in seeing what you really like to do.
Mhm.
And when you really know what you like to do, that's when you could start targeting the organizations where you want to work
Right. Right.
at. And that's what I do with many people. Um, when it comes to an organization and working with a business, the question always comes first, what's the monkey on your back that you want to get lifted?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a matter of talking that through. Well, if this is the problem, let's try to analyze it and see what is causing the problem. And then as we peel back the onion, we start getting to the core of it.
Mhm.
And then that's where we could start now fixing it.
No, exactly. And as you're saying this, and you're kind of saying you're answering both questions at the same time. You get to the core of what the issues are and then start fixing it, which applies to both individual situations and also businesses as well. And if I'll stick to the individual part because just because that's what the audience here is all about. Can you give a couple of examples where you have facilitated or supported somebody who's gone through either a transition in a similar field or maybe made a shift to another field, and how you were able to get them to their landing place more quickly?
Well, I'll give you one where it'll be it's a situation of a resume
Hmm.
in this individual.
Right.
There's one individual that I had, this is going back years. Um, he was in financial advice. He was a financial advisor. Yeah.
Hmm.
And the company that he worked with let him go. And his presentation skills, unfortunately, were not strong because he didn't like to speak in public. He
Okay.
really did. He had a hard time. And so I started working with him on his presentation skills. And we developed certain types of procedures that enabled him to gather his confidence, and he would be able to deliver a presentation very well.
Hmm.
Um, but what was happening is that he still was not getting the traction from his resume that he felt he should.
Hmm.
And we were talking about it, and I looked at it and I started reading his resume, and I was going through it. It was like the standard type resume. And then I come to the bottom on the second page. What do we generally have on the second page on the bottom? Education.
Right.
He went to school. Well, all of a sudden I looked at it and I was like, why is this on page 2? And he said,
Okay.
well, everybody says education's on page 2. Well, generally that's the case. However, this individual, undergraduate, Dartmouth,
Hmm.
master's, Harvard,
Okay.
PhD, John Hopkins.
Okay.
Okay. And so I said to him, why did you go to these schools? And he said, well, they have a good reputation.
Okay.
Really? Don't you think other people might want to take a look at it? Because this is pretty unusual. You're a pretty smart guy. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, but so what we did is that we altered his summary at the beginning of his resume. And then right after his summary, we added his education background
Hmm.
on page 1. Well, within about 2 weeks, he
You got
started getting calls.
right.
And within 4 weeks, he landed his position.
Yeah, that's a good example. Although he would be an exception, but most people education page 2. But when you have those three lined up next to each other, you can't ignore that. I mean, that's going to get everybody's attention right away.
Right. But, and what you say, yes, he was unusual. But the point is not only, is it that we moved for him this situation, but at the same time, other people who have their resume, they have to look at what they're really strong at, what they should emphasize. Okay. Like for instance, when I have people put together their resumes, I
Hmm.
have on the first page a section where I tell them to put their major accomplishments.
Hmm.
And based upon the job specs and to see in their background what they have done, that it's a major accomplishment that would relate to a job spec, I
I
want to
see.
have that up front.
Right.
Okay. Right then
Hmm.
and there. And at the same time, have it up front. Uh, don't include the name of the company, but then repeat that under the company where you've done it. This way
Exactly.
you hit it twice. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Another situation I had was an individual he was a finance individual, and he was really, really good. He was smart, and he was in transition, unfortunately. And he called me. He said, "Look, can we have a cup of coffee? I got a problem here." And I said, "What's your problem?" He says, "Well, I'm always coming in second or third."
Hmm.
I said, "Well, how do you know it was second or third?" But that's besides the point. You either first or whenever.
Not, yeah, right.
Yeah. And I said, "Look, all right, let's meet for coffee. Bring your paperwork with you." So we sat down and we started talking. And I said, "Well, tell me the situations. What's happened?" And he says, "Well, the last time he went to an interview last week, and he was at the interview, and everybody, he was asking questions, okay, to start with, but then he had everybody tell him what the position was all about, and they would tell him, and that was it." And I said, "Well, what kind of follow-up questions did you have?"
Yeah.
He said,
Hmm.
he said, "I didn't have any." I said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I knew how to solve the problem." I said, "That's great. You know how, but didn't you tell him that?" I didn't want to give him any free consulting.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I didn't say anything. So I said, "Well, how about the other? Let's talk about another interview you had." And he goes in and he said, "Well, I came in, they had my resume, and you know, they were telling me about the job, and they told me everything." And I said, "Okay, and then what'd you do?" I listened a lot. I said, "Well, what'd you ask?" Well, I didn't have to ask him anything. I knew what the answers were. I knew how to finish that.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I said, "Wait a second. When you go for an interview, this is a conversation. It's not an interrogation. It's a conversation, and you have
Right.
to partake in the conversation. You should be asking questions."
Hmm.
Well, I don't, but I know what I have to do. Ask questions, and you could tell them, in this case, you might want to do this. Well, he finally started doing that, and then within 6 weeks, he landed.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big shift because he had a point about not providing free consulting. If you put too much out there and they say, "Thank you very much, we'll do it ourselves." On the other hand, if you circle back to your resume and say, "Well, the problem that you just described to me, I handled," and you can literally point to the place on your resume where you took care of something like that, or to your point, ask questions to get clarification on it, and then it becomes more of a, like you were saying, more of a dialogue as opposed to an interrogation. I mean, there's not a 60-watt light bulb over your head, during the interview, and it's good that you had that was probably his most valuable cup of coffee in his life, just to get him out of the funk of, I don't want to disclose too much. But then it ultimately landed him in a position that he was qualified for. So,
No, it always happens. I mean, I had a finance individual who was in between successes, as I call it,
mhm,
and he was looking for a position, and we were chatting, and we went through this situation where I said, "What do you want to do?" He
mhm,
said, "Well, I'm not really sure anymore." And I said, "Well, let's make your list, your likes and dislikes, and let's talk about it." And we started discussing it, and it turned out that he really enjoyed the product of the company he worked at.
hmm,
Uh, he really got involved in products and sales.
okay,
Well, as a result of it, he started applying for sales jobs instead of finance jobs.
huh,
And you say, "Well, that's pretty unusual." But because he was a finance individual, he also has a very good understanding of profit margins and what's
yeah,
involved in shipments and everything of that nature. And as a result of it, he went out and tried to find positions in sales, and he landed. At that time, it was a middle management position in sales. He then became, VP of the organization in sales.
nice,
So
yeah,
those
nice.
things happen by looking and seeing what's your passion, what's your skills, how will they help the organization?
Well, depending on what the selling cycle was or is and what the product or service is, and you say he liked the product, I mean, if he has a great experience with it, it's a lot easier to sell something that you have a good experience with than something you're trying to make up about what your experience is. And and you can develop a relationship with the buyers, particularly on margin related stuff, if you have that finance background. So that makes some sense. By the way, with all of your background in finance, IT, operations, et cetera, based on those a couple of resume changes, you just put a stripe on for marketing director too, by the way. So, anyway, which is more of what I've done at through my career. So yeah, any recommendations that you would have for anybody who's listening or watching here as to how to go through this process? I mean, you talked about asking questions and you talked about skills and values, anything, but just any final thoughts on successfully navigating.
Look, there's different ways to do it. You could go to different networking groups, hear what the speakers have to say. Okay. You could, form a little group yourself of people in transition, call them, search buddies who will, help you through it. Or you could hire a coach who could help you out. Look, professional ball players or, hockey players, whatever, they hire professional coaches to help them through it. Okay.
Right.
And you could also do that. If you hire a coach, what you want to look at is what would you need a coach for? Because do you need a generalist or do you need a specialist? Certain coaches will specialize in interviewing, other ones would be resume writing. You have LinkedIn with Ken Lang, who's really, really good, a good friend of mine. Alex Freund does the interviews. You could do that with the career coach. The thing what you want to do as you go through this, know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the key. And be positive, because, negative people don't get hired.
No.
Okay. Everybody will land. It's just a matter of having confidence in yourself. But you have to look at it, especially if you were, laid off, re-engineered, whatever you want to call it. Okay. You still have your skill set. Okay. Because that idiot on the other side who let you go didn't see the value that you added to the organization, doesn't mean that another company will not see and really be in a situation where they would want somebody with your skill set.
And one of the other things that you mentioned, you and Ken had put together a networking group. I just want to put it in the chat here that
mynetworkingcentral.com. That's what it is, mynetworkingcentral.com. It's a platform for job seekers that it's a search engine for networking groups. We also have speakers who speak at networking groups, who specialize in different techniques, etc. And you could find all this and say, I want to go to a networking group that meets on Thursday, that doesn't cost me anything, that will have a speaker who will be speaking about branding today. And you will be able to find that on My Networking Central. Just as quick as I just told you what to look for, you could find it. And we put it together to help those people who are in transition. Look, we're people helpers. Lots of people on this call who we've had today really, want to help people. We can only do it if you reach out to us. And in doing that, we really like to know, what your needs are. I could tell you, I get many calls where people said to me, I'm in transition. I'm looking for a position, and I ask them, well, what type of position are you looking for? And they say to me, I'm going to take any position. To which I tell them that, you know what, I have a position for you. And they say, really? And tell them, well, look, down the block over there, if you go, McDonald's is hiring
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And they said, that's not what I'm looking for. Well, you told me any job. So be careful on what you say. Be, specific as what your needs are and what you're looking for. And that is very, very helpful
Mhm.
and will shorten your time at being in transition.
100%. Any other questions in the chat that people want to ask Marty? Let's see. We have a great presentation, Marty. Always insightful.
Thanks, Gerard.
Any,
Appreciate it.
any thoughts for job seekers in their 50s and 60s regarding keeping their skills up to date?
You have to, in today's environment, okay,
Right.
keep your skills up to date. And that's not only if you're older, but at any age. And I mean, we could spend at least another hour talking about ageism in the workplace.
Mhm.
Ageism exists. It first raised its ugly head in 1968. Okay. It's there. But what you have to show people is that you add value, you have experience, you are able to be steady in what you do. You know that the job has to be done and how to get it done.
Mhm.
It's like this, but I tell my the people I coach, when they say, well, I've been overqualified, that's nonsense.
Mhm.
Okay. You tell the person, if you've been overqualified, hey, if you're in an airline and you're flying over the Hudson River and your engines go out, do you want an overqualified pilot like Sully Sullenberger
Right.
in the cockpit, or do you want to have a co-pilot who's had 2 years of experience?
Right.
You tell me.
Well, you make a valid point, and when this comes up with any of my clients, and I say this at job fairs, for those of you who are concerned about ageism, it really isn't it at all, because if you have current skills, keyword there, current, if you can work with people of all ages and not parent them, if you can switch priorities on a dime and not get resentful for it, and you can put teams together who can do the things that you need to do, your experience will be such that you're solving problems before the 20 and 30 somethings even figure out there is a problem. So take advantage of that, leverage that, because this is, you know, people that are in, the only occupation where age does not seem to be an issue happens to be in the US Congress or the Senate, I see. And there needs to be that's a whole separate conversation about term limits and everything. But if you can add value, that's your point is 100% on point, because once you can demonstrate you can add value and then show it, you're there.
That's totally correct. It's adding value to the companies. It's not adding value to you. It's adding company to them, value to them.
Right.
And when they see that, and as you say, Bill, how you could get along with people in all different generations.
Mhm.
Okay. And with your talents that you have as a more matured person in the workforce, you will land. Okay. Companies look for people who have the experience that they need, will lift that monkey off their back.
Yep.
And that's what they want. So
Exactly. So, Marty, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to share your wisdom, insights, experience, and some fun stories. And if there's no other questions, I'll stop the recording, and then I will this time leave the unmute button on so people can kibitz back and forth until the top of the hour when my friend Donna Cornelius will be on. So thank you, Marty, again.
thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Been a pleasure.
You got it. Okay.